Hi, everybody, and welcome to Practical Astros, the very last DECAN project. We're going to talk about Pisces, and this one is a little different. We're not doing a traditional video because I'm out at my sister's farm, and it's blessedly without really great Zoom. So we're doing this in person. This is the only one I've done in person, and happy to do it with my sister Amy. So welcome, Amy. Thanks for talking about Pisces with me.
Yay!
So we're going to talk about the moon card as Pisces, and then we're going to go through the 3 decans of Pisces. We're talking about the 8 of Cups, 9 of Cups, 10 of Cups, and then the planetary associations with Pisces. So I basically did not prep Amy much because I just wanted this to be a conversation. But right now we have the Sun in Pisces, we have the Sun in Pisces 1, Mercury Pisces 2, and Saturn in Pisces 3. And my sister has one of these placements at least. You have Mercury in Pisces. Do you remember where it is?
Mm-mm.
No.
No.
And then you have Jupiter in Pisces as well?
Yeah.
So what are your just overall thoughts on Pisces just as a sign? Like what comes to mind when you think about Pisces and just your own experience with your Pisces placements?
Pisces to me is the ocean in the sense of mystery, and the vastness of it.
Yeah.
Like the unconscious. Like in my dreams, whenever there's water involved, it feels like a communion with the unconscious.
Like ocean specifically or water in any form?
Mostly like being in the water. And I will be in clear water or murky water. I will be overwhelmed by water or not. Swimming in it. Like maybe the water is very intense, but sometimes I can kind of ride it. So to me, Pisces is that realm.
Yeah.
That the unconscious. Sometimes the unconscious is... We just got joined by my partner in crime, Mercury and Pisces son, and he just broke the rules.
Like 5 minutes in. That's
5 minutes in.
So you have a degree in counseling, and so like you work with dreams a lot.
Yeah.
Do you find that the water
it's a
element...
master's in depth psychology, and I went into depth psychology as a official study, in part because I had a confrontation with the unconscious, is what Jung calls it. All my life, I have lived in an imaginal world, and maybe this is part of having Mercury in Pisces. To me, it feels like it is.
Yeah.
Really living in the story world. Living in the imaginal, which is the unconscious.
Yeah.
So I see everything comes to me in pictures. It's like this constant stream of images. And I thought this was just what it was like to be human, but I talked to other people and I realized that it's not.
Yeah.
When I'm wanting to communicate heart to heart with somebody and really be present with them, which is a good practice as a therapist.
Yeah.
I just listen or watch the stream of images that come to me. And to me, it's the unconscious speaking.
So like if you have a conversation with somebody, the words that they're saying, you're creating, or you're allowing whatever colors or textures or images that come to you as you're listening to other people talk?
Yeah, things come up. Like, it feels like a wellspring. It feels like God.
Yeah.
It feels like inspiration, and it feels outside of me.
Yeah.
It feels like it's something that's inside of all of us, but to me, I have access to it through images.
Yeah.
And those images are constantly streaming in. I can access them more easily than other times. The more that I trust it, the more that I have access to them.
Yeah.
I think I used to not trust it, and I used to think that it was crazy or just my imagination,
Right.
in quotes.
Right.
I mean, that's really been the biggest healing for me, having Mercury in Pisces and stepping into more of a professional role as a therapist, is just turning that it's just my imagination into claiming like this is the imagination.
Yeah. So let's talk about dreams, because I know that you incorporate dreams into just life. And so when I hear somebody say it's just my imagination, that's kind of how I operate in the dream world, is like learning how to take value in the dream world.
Right.
That it's kind of inextricable from the waking.
Yeah.
And
Well, they also say it's just a dream.
right. Yeah. Like
So
it disenfranchises the
Yeah.
information that comes through.
Right.
So how was your dream world, I guess, is the question.
My relationship with my dreams is, I've noticed over many years, is indicative of my relationship with the unconscious in general. And ever since, so I kind of go in and out of having a deeper relationship with it. When I had my second child and I wasn't sleeping and I was under a lot of stress, it really feels like that I had gone from having an incredibly complex and rewarding and nourishing relationship with my dreams and the dream world and the unconscious, to feeling like it just dried up. And when I think about how much of my creative energy had gone into actually creating a being and nourishing that being in the physical world, it makes sense. I lamented it for a long time. I mean, even like writing in my journals, every morning I would start it out by, I can't remember my dreams again. And so it was like every day I was affirming this negative kind of approach to it. And so now I feel more like I know it'll come back.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But
I mean, just even as someone that practices dream work a lot,
Yeah.
I have the same thing. Where and it took a while to not like beat myself up for when the dreams were just evaporating quickly.
Yeah.
Like I would try to catch them by their tail before
Yeah.
they left, and I knew that they were there.
Yeah.
But then they would just be gone.
Yeah.
And it's like connecting with a spirit. You can't force it.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it as like a engagement with somebody, you can't force someone to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how the dreams work, you know. I think that being exhausted or stressed out, it's like sometimes having that much more information is just more taxing to you as a human being.
Yeah.
Even though it is nourishing to have that dream life. But I could see
a relationship.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have the space for it,
Yeah.
then it's gonna, like, I mean, this happens in our lives when we get busy. We can't talk to all of our friends. You can't return calls, or you can't sit down and have a meaningful conversation. You're just like too busy. And
Yeah.
I think it is as a relationship, it's very demanding in a way. I mean, what are you going to do with that material?
Yeah.
There's a kind of an idea that, you know, we should be living out our dreams in a sense, because this is not just something to consume.
Right. Yeah.
It's part of you, and there's something that could be done with it.
Yeah. But a lot of times when you dream, and also like when you create, just thinking of the creative essence of Pisces, just as, I mean, it's ruled by Jupiter and Venus. It's ruled by both benefics. You know, no other sign has that that blessing of wanting things to merge. But when you when you dream a lot, you don't sleep, you don't rest. And to me, Pisces is so much about rest. And Pisces is about memory and remembrance. And you need that rest in order to like honor the memory.
And create them.
And then create them. Yeah.
Because that's what we're doing in our dreams, right? It's like, I mean, doing in our sleep.
Yeah.
Is the neural pathways are kind of integrating experiences, which creates memory.
Yeah, yeah. But like Venus, especially Venus exalts in Pisces. And I think one of the reasons why it's there, because if you think of Venus as like the goddess of love and the one that wants to connect and merge, it's like, well, if we have people that we love or memories that we love, the way we honor that is that we remember it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we do things that are honorable to it. We have altars, or we take pictures, or we have birthdays and celebrations.
Yeah.
We have rituals. We have all these things
Renewing
that connection.
Yeah.
And it's the memory. It's like the sense of being immortal is like we have this human desire to not want to be forgotten, because to be forgotten means that we weren't loved, or the last person that loved us is now gone. So our memory is gone. Our story is gone.
Yeah.
And
I was just telling Zeke the other day, like, there are stories out there that have been lost. They're extinct because the last person that knew that story and that told that story died.
Yeah.
And the story died with them.
Yeah.
And I was just overwhelmed by all the stories that we'll never know.
Yeah. I remember reading Sandman for the first time and getting to this one book. And I didn't want to pick up the next book. And I told you, I was like, I looked at the first page and it was like this parade of people and they were going to a funeral, and I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Because it was like, and you said, you were like, all stories must end. But it's like the story can end, but knowing that the story has a beginning and ending, we can love that story. And it took me months to pick that book up because I was like, I don't want it to end.
Yeah.
But it's because we love. And like, to me, that is Pisces. It's like that being completely connected and completely immersed, especially in that story of all stories.
Yeah.
Because it is like the story of the story.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Promethea too, in a way.
Yeah.
Both of those affected both of us profoundly and continue to.
Yeah.
They just resonate and they continue to kind of unveil themselves over and over, throughout the years.
Promethea has like, it sits like in the spheres of influence in astrology. The DECANS are like they're above the zodiac. Like they are like the faces that, it's almost like the masks that the gods push their faces through to see us and participate. They're so out on these outer realms. And I think that's why I love the DECANS so much, because they're like beyond us in story time. And Promethea is like that. There's something so eternal about the Promethea story that I don't grieve it. Yeah. Sandman feels closer. Sandman
more
feels
personal
more personal. And I think it's because it's the dream. It's like the infinity that happens kind of internally with us. Promethea is amazing. But it's like, I don't grieve Promethea. I know that she's like constantly there. You know, that there's two images in the Promethea book. One is when Hermes looks at the reader. And then there's one where they're singing, she'll be coming around the mountain with like the sunshine coming up with the dawn. You know? So Pisces and the moon card. So it's, the moon in astrology is the moon, and tarot is the high priestess, but the moon card in tarot is actually Pisces. And I consider the two cards together because then the high priestess card, she has two pillars at her back, and she's kind of guarding that threshold into the realm beyond her. And to me, it feels like the moon realm is what she's guarding.
Right.
There's that connection there.
Yeah. And she's an intermediary, because that's really what the high priestess is.
Yeah.
Is the intermediary.
Yeah.
Between the seeker, who is not maybe able to access the unconscious with enough ego to dialogue with it and not be just like overwhelmed by it, which the moon card is to me.
Yeah.
Like the moon card can just be devouring. That's psychosis. When you have no conscious relationship
Yeah.
to the unconscious, it's psychotic. Like experience where you don't know what's real.
Yeah.
You know, the moon card to me, there's a lot of, I'm not afraid of it. I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah.
And that's what someone who, like a high priestess who is walking the path in a relationship with the unconscious, knowing herself.
Yeah.
Know thyself. That's really the only way that you can be an intermediary between those worlds.
Yeah.
Is developing your capacity to relate to the unconscious in a conscious way.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the moon in astrology does, is the intermediary. It helps kind of help be that interpreter of all the other planets with us on Earth. I mean, it doesn't have its own light. It just reflects the sun's light. And all of the other zodiac, they have their relationship because of their relationship to the sun. And there's a book called The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler, and it talks about the outer planets, so Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, as different stages and like the birth of a child. And so Neptune is considered the modern ruler of Pisces, and I don't ascribe to modern rulership, but I think that there are elements of Pisces that maybe just collectively we've decided is Neptunian. And the sense of, like, you aren't connected to ego and you have that psychosis. It's like the in the archetypal universe, he talks about that being in the womb and being just floating in amniotic fluid. It's like you are completely connected and you have zero awareness of kind of where you're at, like that state.
There's no differentiation of self.
Yeah.
But we have to go through that, right?
Yeah.
Like we're born, and then we have all of the painful kind of realizations, like, are in our body. Like, my needs are not being met exactly when I want them.
Right.
You know, this is all sort of like suffering is the creation of consciousness. And so if we can remember consciously, that's what Pisces is, remembering that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of like the lucid dreaming of the zodiac.
Yeah.
Because that's like a slight against Pisces, is like not having boundaries, or not knowing that boundaries should be there, like not being able to recognize it. That is also like the blessing of Pisces, is like being freely giving and having that without condition compassion and love, you know, with those around. But like in the moon card, you can see it in itself it can't operate in isolation. You know, like it does need some structure, which the three decan rulers, it has Saturn as the decan ruler for Pisces 1, so the first 10 degrees. And to me, like, Saturn is currently in Pisces, and it's been a curious transit, because Saturn is the limit. It's the container to hold the Piscean water. And so it doesn't have a lot of just dignity on its own in Pisces. And there have been like mundane things of, like, you know, submarines, you know, sinking and imploding, and you know, some like kind of mundane things with Saturn and water. But I just think about all the decans, like the planetary visitor of the decan ruler is kind of coming there to bring something to offer. It's almost like a visiting dignitary to the temple of Pisces, saying like, I don't live here, but I can bring you this. And so what do you see, how do you see Saturn as being, what do you see it bringing to Pisces as kind of like almost like a teacher in a school? Like, the school is Jupiterian, but Saturn is like a visiting professor. What can it teach within the Pisces environment? You love Saturn, I know.
Oh, yeah.
As the patron saint of farmers.
I feel like I've been in Saturn retrograde for like 22 years, because I'm just like, I just won't listen.
Yeah.
I'm remembering when I was in school and for depth psychology, and I was doing yoga regularly, and I was in therapy, had a great therapist. There was this experience because I had a lot of encounters with the unconscious at that time. And a lot of these would happen like during yoga. As I was in yoga, I was really starting to understand that I had this constant flow of images, that it was coming from some divine place, that these were meaningful.
Yeah.
Like Jung calls it active imagination, where we can kind of dialogue with the unconscious. But that can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And at the time, I hadn't learned this. So I was doing yoga, and I had this series of images that were coming as usual, and they started to become overwhelming. And I was sharing about it later with my therapist, and she and I discovered together a sort of pattern in me where I didn't think that I could stop the images when they were overwhelming.
Kind of like a panic attack.
Well, I thought I would be punished because this is part of my wound. Like no was not okay.
Yeah.
To say no meant bad things would happen.
Yeah.
So this was true for me with this flow of images. And so I learned that I could talk to this power and say that's too much for me, and that it wasn't going to stop the flow. I didn't want the flow to stop,
right?
But I needed to regulate it,
right?
I needed to be able to say, like, that's too much for me right now, or we're going to need to redirect this because it's just getting out of hand.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the unconscious. Like, this is the place of nightmares.
Yeah.
And like beatific, like bliss.
Yeah.
It's all of it.
Yeah.
And you're never really quite sure where you're going to go.
Yeah.
So to me, like, that's what I think of Saturn and Pisces is this ability to regulate it, to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, I do this in my nightmares. If I'm lucid enough,
yeah,
I can like go back and undo something or wake up. If I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can.
Yeah.
You know, but that it's like the ocean is an amazing place, but we can also drown in it or get swallowed by a whale or something.
Yeah.
And so Saturn is maybe a way to relate to it.
Yeah.
So that we don't just go into psychosis.
Yeah, that makes sense. The 8 of Cups is the tarot card associated with the first decan of Pisces. So there's a character, I thought it was a girl, but Zeke thought it was a boy with a red hood. And she or he is in like a valley with water around. And we see what looks like almost like a solar eclipse. Like it's a moon, but there's it's an interesting moon. It's like it kind of haunts me. We're looking at the Morgan Greer deck, but even in the Rider-Waite-Smith, it has kind of this eclipsed moon. There's 8 cups upright at the forefront of the card, but the person is kind of walking away. And when I've talked to people about this card and pulled it, a lot of what comes up is like people are like, I just need a break, you know, and just hearing you say like the regulation of the unconscious, like to me, it's like my cups are upright, they're fine, but I'm just going to walk away from them for a little while. It's like not abandoning them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to me, it's like the cups would be kind of in disarray. It's like you wouldn't care. It's like you set them up. They're full.
They're balanced.
And maybe because they're full, you don't have any space for any more.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like the 5 of Cups is the one that has like 3 tipped over. But like there's loss, but there's then capacity to have it refilled. But the 8, it's just... The 8 is it's full. What is your sense just of the card? Do you pull this one?
No. No, I don't know if I've ever pulled it. I've pulled the Ten of Cups. I don't pull cups a lot. I pull swords a lot.
Yeah, when you were talking about pain being the birth of consciousness, I'm just thinking like of
Suffering.
the end of Gemini, which is all the mutables are the 8, 9, and 10s in Tarot, and so it's a different story. The swords and the wands, the story seems to progressively get worse.
I know.
But the cups and the coins, it
couldn't get worse.
Like, well, there's more.
I mean, I see this figure turning away and heading toward kind of a darker world, but that's like mystery too.
Yeah.
I see a space in the cups. It looks like it's incomplete. It looks like another cup goes there.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the seeker going to find it.
Yeah, there is a gap in the ones that are on the top. Mm-hmm. And that the person fills that gap.
Yes, yeah. The person fills the gap. And heading toward, the unknown. I mean, that is the beauty of the unconscious is like, so my oldest son is a fisherman, and I can see the allure of it because you're just casting into the water where you can't see anything and pulling things out. And to me, that's what being in relationship with the unconscious is like through dreams or in our creative spaces, when we can get into those creative spaces where we're just being and not doing, whatever it is. Yeah. Like for some people, it's just stacking rocks or, tracing your finger in the sand. Or for me, it's gardening and farming. I just want to be in that space. The space where we can access the mystery and bring things back.
Yeah.
I think that's what that character is doing, is going to get something.
Just to be in that space, yeah. I pull this card with some frequency. I pull the 8 and the 9. I don't pull the 10 that much, but I pull the 8 probably more than the rest of the 3. And it's always like, my one of my favorite things about just Pisces people and Pisces placements and Pisces time is this, okay, we're at the end of this zodiacal year, and Aries is going to come out with a bang. It always does, and like we're all ready for it. So it's like this is a time to just relax about the obligations. Like Saturn being there, it's like, yeah, those were always going to be there, but you can just go escape. I mean, this is like taking an afternoon nap with the intention of having a dream, to work on something, just to get away from just all of the obligations and the hindrances to the imaginal world. Yeah. It's like, this is just an invitation of like, just set it up. Those cups are going to be there when you come back.
Right. There's a certain trust in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's also, I mean, maybe that's what Saturn offers too, is that stability that allows us to go explore. Yeah. I mean, we need an anchor so that we can come back and we don't get lost. Yeah.
I mean, in the card, it's a valley, at the ocean, but it's like it's held on either side by old, dark, tall, jaggedy towers. It feels Saturnian. So move into the 9 of Cups. So it's ruled by Jupiter. So it's a double Jupiter DECANS, ruled by Jupiter, by decan and by domicile. And the Morgan Greer card looks different than the Rider-Waite-Smith. We see a bit more of the full bodies in the Rider-Waite-Smith. And the Rider-Waite-Smith, he's like got his arms crossed and he's wearing that like the striped clothes, and he's like fully on his own. this one, it's a little bit more zoomed in, but you see all 9 cups, and they are equally kind of balanced on a table behind him. Mm-hmm. He's ready cheeked, almost like he's drank all 9 cups of wine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this it's Jupiterian, so it's like Pisces is ruled by both benefics, but in the decans it's flanked by both malefics. So it has that tension of the two, but this one here is like this double dose of Jupiter.
Yeah, this is so completely different than the 9 of Swords, which is what I always call it. I mean, could you have it be any different? But it's so I'm a lot more familiar with the 9 of Swords, and there are all these swords hanging over the person's head.
Yeah.
Like worries.
Yeah.
It's all mental.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this is going to also be sort of like thoughts.
Well, also, but it's cups, so it's like the emotional space. It can be
right.
the emotional thoughts. It can be thoughts that are heavy on the mind. But you're right. Like that card, it has all the swords above.
It's above,
and same with here. So it's almost like it is like weighing on the mind, but in the more emotional realm.
Yeah, it's cool to see these because I never pull them. I just pull the 10. I've pulled the 10 of Cups in very surprising places, like really where I thought I was going to get the Death card or something, and then the 10 of Cups comes, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, so what's your relationship with Jupiter? Because this is such a richly Jupiter card. I mean, you have Jupiter in Pisces.
I think of the fun father. I mean, compared to Saturn, which is like the no, and Jupiter is just like the yes, and
yes, of course.
the love, and like
yes,
and here's something better that you didn't even think of. It feels. I'm always looking forward to when Jupiter is making harmonious aspects in my chart.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to see the book.
I'm going to look up your chart while we're looking at it. So you have Jupiter at 5 degrees Pisces, which is where the sun is right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a nice little transit.
Interesting.
So you have Jupiter in this decan, and you have Mercury in the middle decan.
Yeah, I think of Jupiter and Mercury together, too. I think of them, Mercury is always, or Hermes is always having to do Zeus's backhanded sort of, keeping the back door open work.
Yeah.
They feel like a very mischievous and fun pair. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, Jupiter just feels like such a blessing. I mean, that card is it just feels like a blessing. Like there's just happiness and there's contentment, even though it's a 9. Like to me, I think of 9s as difficult.
Yeah.
But that one doesn't look very difficult.
I think maybe because you pull the 9 of Swords so much, that, the 9 is kind of like the end of the story. Like the 10 is like the threshold to go on. Like 10 is the last number, but 9 is kind of like the finale of it. Yeah. And
it's like the last 50 yards of a marathon or something.
Yeah. And so to have, like with the cups and the coins, to have them kind of end on a more higher note, like this does feel like it's like he looks satiated. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like he's about to tell you a story.
Yeah.
A long story.
Yeah. The 9 of Coins has a similar character. She's in a garden alone with like lots of luxury around her. And that's the one thing I look at 9s is like, is like there is a little bit of loneliness with it because it's like the story is done, but you're kind of finishing it alone. And so it does have this like tinge of solitude, but maybe that's like when you're with people, you can like reminisce about stories. But then when you're alone, it's like when you're truly with that memory, it's like you can talk about it with someone and like relive it and laugh about it. I was telling Morgan about the "you ain't got no biscuits" memory. But then if we sit in solitude about memory, that's different than having like kind of like a fun conversation about it. And so while the nines are like this one and the 9 of coins feel, it's like they feel successful, but they also feel a little lonely. Right. It's like that tension between the two of, this is what you remember, like on your death. This is like a deathbed card. Right. Of like, there's this flooding of dopamine and memory of your entire life as you're like exiting. Yeah. You know?
And if you think about how, like, I've lost 2 friends. They were both pretty young, and we lived some amazing stories together. And they're gone, and those stories are only in my memory. Yeah. Pretty epic kinds of experiences, and it feels very lonely in that regard. It feels very...
To be the holder of that.
Yeah. Like, I don't get to reminisce about this with anybody else. It's not the same. Yeah. If you can tell the story, but if you weren't there... I can tell you this story, but you weren't there. It's like if my friends and I were reminiscing about something we had lived through together, and now I don't have that ability because they're gone. Yeah. There's a certain loneliness to those memories. Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost like explaining a joke. You just like take the humor out of it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. I don't know. Just still thinking about this idea of like stories that die. I'm also thinking about the hermit. Because in the major arcana, the hermit is the 9. Yeah. And there's that sort of turning away from everything and going off on your own. Yeah. And the loneliness there, or the solitude. I mean, loneliness and solitude, those are like spaces, like mental spaces. Yeah. It's like an attitude. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and with the hermit card, it's like the illumination is there. It's almost like you get a different type of illumination of something when you spend time alone with it. Right. You know? Yeah. So from the 9, we go to the 10, which is the final decan of the zodiac of Pisces. It's ruled by the Tower, which is Mars. The card that all the little boys like because it's a fortress that's burning down.
It's got all the action.
It has all the action, which doesn't, it doesn't like fit Pisces initially, because Pisces isn't necessarily like a, it's the very final, it's almost like the dregs that last 10 degrees. It's like the final story of the zodiac. But Mars is here at the end. And I think of like giving birth and like you need that rush. You need that final push when you were completely exhausted to like get through in order to start again. And so Mars in a water sign isn't able to express its significations that quickly, but it still has something to bring to Pisces. And so I think of just fire, the fiery element mixed with the watery nature as being that,
We were just talking about this. Zeke and I were talking about it. He was talking about, is lava stronger than water? And we were talking about how it's all about, which one is present in greater quantities. Yeah. Because water will be vaporized by, if there's more lava than water. Yeah. But water will ultimately cool the lava off and turn it back into rock. Yeah. And so
still be water.
Yeah. Like water really does. Well, he was asking which one would win because it's all a competition. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, water always wins, really. At the end of the day.
Well, actually, water really wins.
Well, if you think of, like, just what we've experienced in Western North Carolina with the amount of water that has come through and completely changed the landscape in lives and taken lives and, during a hurricane, but then also it carved out and broke open lots of stories for a lot of people. Yeah. And even the last couple of times it rained, the rivers behaved so much more differently.
Yes, right.
Even though it wasn't that much rain, but because that water made that much of an impact I think water always wins.
Yeah.
It does. It seems so gentle and like, it goes around the rocks and, it's pretty and it makes rainbows like it's on this card. But it is like, to me, it's like the essence of like all of our collective spirit is water.
Right. Right. The last part of Pisces has always been the most difficult part for me, and being an Aries, and feeling so connected to that kind of bursting forth of life and the energy that it requires to kind of break out of this. It's almost like this stupor or something. It's like the Pisces is so deep and charged and heavy and intense, and you're coming out of winter where everything has just been so still for so long, and like I see it as like the Ouroboros, the snake biting its tail, and like that point where they come together is so intense, because it's the opposites, and how to come out of that, and what are you coming out of? I think I have a very difficult time being in that space that it's like death in a way. Every year we just sort of like everything has to kind of like end to begin again. And so to be in that point of opposites is very difficult.
Well, and maybe Mars here gives the momentum and the push to be able to survive that,
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we think of like the astrology man, the zodiac body, it's like feet are represented by Pisces and the head is Aries. Like to go from the feet back up to the head, you need all the momentum you can get.
Right.
And there was another astrologer talked about like just what we talk about waterfalls and like being grounded with earth and like these things that are like feminine and yin and receptive, but it's like we fire up or we get like we're full of hot air. It's like air and fire go up. So it's like takes that much more effort for earth and water to ascend. It's like descending is like the inertia of descending for water is just, that's what its job is.
Right.
So to go the other way, it takes like that much more fuel, I guess. And maybe it's like I'm partial to Jupiter, and so I look at the middle decan of Jupiter as almost like this, like we're going to need all of our resources because in the last 10 days we have to, like the card, the Morgan Greer has like two people kind of holding a single cup together, and then there's a rainbow, and then there's this kind of cascade of cups, and the Rider-Waite-Smith, there's two people with their arms raised, and there's like a rainbow with all the cups above them. But I kind of feel like the middle degrees of Pisces helps like inflate the momentum that's needed for the last 10 degrees. And it's like in dreams, if I suffer from my feet being stuck to the ground, or like I'm walking through quicksand or mud, or I'm just like too heavy on the bottom end, it takes that much more just shedding and letting go in order to like break out of that, to be able to ascend, to be able to fly, or to be able to like get above the trees. And it is that tension. It's like it's necessary. It's also painful. It's painful to have that break.
But Jung talks about this concept called the transcendent function, I think is the name of it. But it's a reconciliation of the opposites. So when you stay with the tension of the opposites, like to be grounded and to fly, there is a struggle and a difficulty holding that space. I mean, psychologically, we can look at it like, say you have a partner that you really love, and you love a lot of things about them, but they do these things, or maybe a particular thing that you hate, and it kind of makes you want to hate them, but you love them. You both love them and hate them at the same time. And if we can hold both of those as true, then we can start to understand something greater than we were able to understand
Just
before
loving
when we were just loving or just hating.
Yeah.
So this is all a projection anyway. It's not anything about them. It's all about you.
Yeah.
And so you can transcend these opposites and come to another space of knowing, really knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And so when we're coming out of Pisces into Aries, like when we're in this difficult place of complete dissolution where everything is one, and then we're going into this I am of Aries, like if we can hold both of those,
Yeah.
what can come of it?
Yeah.
And we get a chance to do it every year.
Yeah.
And it's always very hard for me, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're coming out, I mean, by the time, in the Northern Hemisphere at least, by the time Pisces comes around, like there are flowers sprouting, like the ground is warmer, like it looks already, the sap is flowing, it looks like spring.
Yeah.
It's different than like the beginning of Pisces from Aquarius, because it still feels like awfully cold and frigid, and it's hard to imagine. It's like, I know spring's going to come, but it still feels a far ways away. By the end of Pisces to Aries, it's like, let's get going.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like the Aries heat just evaporates all that like mystical fog that's around Pisces. Like there is something like, it's just bittersweet, and maybe that bittersweetness is that tension.
Yeah.
It's like, I know that spring is coming, but I'm just thinking about kind of this like long night of rest for the winter.
Yeah.
And like that was maybe boring when it happened, or I needed the rest, or I didn't understand why I needed so much sleep, or the sun wasn't coming up. But when Aries arrives, it's like the sun is like, has taken over.
Now we're hot and getting sunburned and stuff.
But it's also like super celebratory, because it feels in a way, it's like we all survived.
Yeah.
You know, with the sun taking over, it's like the sun is our life force. And so when like at Aries 1 at the sunrise, like my friend Gary, who's an Aries sun, like he watches the sunrise on the first morning that the sun is in Aries, whether it's the day before, you know, like if the sun goes into Aries at 5 o'clock, the next morning he'll watch the sunrise. It's like the first moment. And he says it just brings him to tears every time, because it's like the sun survived, like we're going to survive.
Yeah.
And it's bringing all that memory, all that watery memory of Pisces, knowing of like how much escape and death and hardship and loneliness that really is Pisces. It's like looking at Aries, I feel like informs what Pisces is.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're coming, Aries is coming out of that for a reason.
Yeah.
These stories have been told for reasons, and then they get repeated every year. And this has been since for thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the story of the stars might be the oldest story.
Yeah.
Because it's the stars are the one thing that haven't changed. I mean, maybe our interpretation of them has
changed. The stories there's a lot of different stories. Yeah. But they're all stories about the stars.
They're all stories about the stars. And so it's like, as the earth has changed shape and, you know, stories have come and gone, it's like talking about the stars that are above us, to me, is the oldest one.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's where the DECANS are. It's like, if we think of it like a film and just the gods pressing their face through the film, it's like the DECANS are the ones that they look through. And they participate, and they invite us, and they ask us these questions of like, how do you live in this world, like during these times?
This is the most obvious kind of statement, and I'm an April Fool's baby, and I don't mind being a fool, but I just realized when I was looking at the stars last night, because I watch them obviously at night, and and I watched the way that they shift, and I was seeing where Orion is, and I always have to say goodbye to Orion because Orion is my winter companion.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I wonder what stars are out there in the daytime, like, that I'm not seeing, you know? Because, like, it's always, like, the earth is spinning, and I have this relationship with this section of the sky at different sections at different times of the year, like, but what's happening in the day? I never really thought about it.
Yeah, the sun just outshines them.
Yeah, but there's this whole, like, the stories that I see in the sky at night, especially in the wintertime, because I don't know why, it feels louder to me in the winter. The stars are louder.
I think
It's
because
so
you can
important.
see more of the stars too. That's part of it. It's like the leaves down, the stars like peer down at us more, and it's like if the stars can see us, then we can see the stars. It's like it almost feels like in the wintertime they have more interest in what we're doing too.
Feels like it, yeah. But then I was just wondering what stories were being told in the daytime that I never even thought about.
Yeah.
And so there was this whole kind of cascade of thoughts about, like, just the spirit world and the world that is unseen, and how much is constantly happening that we don't see. And I'm just always realizing how little I know.
Yeah.
And being curious about it.
Yeah.
Like, I like to say I don't know. I like to, I don't mind being the fool, because in admitting that I don't know, I get to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Thinking that you figured it out means that you kind of shut it off.
Yeah.
There's this book that I'm reading, and they were saying, like, the king died and then the queen died is a story. But the king died and then the queen died of a broken heart is a plot. And then this mystery writer said, well, everyone thought that the queen died of a broken heart, but they didn't see the 2 puncture wounds on her neck. It's like just taking these 3 things. It's like the king died and the queen died. It's just data.
Yeah.
And the king died and the queen died of the queen died of a broken heart shows some cause, but it's like the mystery's solved.
Yeah.
But then, like, saying, like, but what if?
Yeah.
Like, it leaves it open. And so I think that just the act of curiosity that I think you get from actual boredom, and not having your needs always met whenever you want them, and not having, like, all the information that just wraps things up in a nice, neat story, or not having information that having information that is conflicting, like you love someone and they're also a shit sometimes. Like having the complication keeps us propelling forward. You know, having stories that we don't know if they're true, or don't know if that's the way the story actually ended, or just not having it open and not having it wrapped up, even though, yes, all stories must end. I feel like just the curiosity of how stories can continue is that propelling of the wheel, is coming from Pisces to Aries, is going from Aries to Taurus and Taurus to Gemini, and all this. It's like the propelling of it is not knowing. Is thinking we have enough of it just to keep us going, but to not know is the best thing. You know?
And ironically, or you know, maybe in an absurd sort of, like, the gods are laughing at us, humans can't stand that. Like, we have to be certain. And everything in us is geared towards this certainty. And in depth psychology, you know, we call that the small self, the ego, which is constantly trying to limit what we see and control how we do things. And that in a sort of is like Aries. It's very certain and very confident, and I'm going for it, and everything is, I'm right, and it's all very black and white. Pisces is like, nah, man, like, you don't know nothing, and we're all, you know, you aren't even there, you know. And so that kind of tension between the two is very real. It's like you have a self that is divine, that is really, like, participating in the unconscious. And then you have this sense of who you are. I am. The small self and the true self, or the higher self. And there's this tension between them. And I think that's where we are right now. Like, at this time of year, we're really feeling it. And maybe what we need to do is take this I am and grow it. There has to be an I. There has to be an ego, or we're just, like, psychotic. I mean, maybe we're blissed out. Maybe we're transcendent. Maybe we're, you know, at one with God, but we could just be looking like shit on the side of the street. Nobody knows that we're actually enlightened,
Yeah.
you know, like we're not participating anymore.
Yeah.
You know, in any sort of sense of, not like productivity or whatever, but anyway, this
community. It's like,
yeah,
like there's the like if we think of like the psychosis within the moon card, because I think that was a good point of like when we're truly 100% there,
yeah,
we're not functional with like our soul's journey and participation of our world that we've been born into.
yeah,
Maybe internally we are, but then it's like we also are born in an incarnate body that has needs and has responsibilities and has relationships and has roles to play and art to create and you know, all of the if we decide that we are individuals, which is the Aries piece, in a society, which is kind of the Pisces piece, by being individual at the same time of being connected compassionately with each other, I think is like the best of both worlds between the two signs.
yeah. And this is all about, like, I see it really evident in today, and a lot of the problems today it's probably been the same as it ever was. I really think that everything has always been this bad and this great.
Yeah.
Is this whole idea of both and, not either or.
Yeah.
Both are true. If we can stay with both are true, that really does open us up into mystery. It's like, how can both be true? That is a fallacy. Like, this isn't even possible. And it's like, well, no, but it is possible.
Yeah.
The person that you love today, you'll hate tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the same person. So you love and hate them at the same time. Like, get your head around that.
Yeah.
So then you're like, who am I? I'm a person who can love and hate the same person.
Yeah.
You know?
Simultaneously.
Yeah. I can be completely generous and stingy. I am all these things.
Yeah.
You know, if we can hold more space for that both and you know, Pisces is symbolized by the two fish.
Yeah.
Which in a negative way can be seen as sort of a duplicitous nature, almost like Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I've seen it kind of manifested in that way.
Yeah.
The one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, kind of thing.
Well, all the mutables are double-bodied.
Okay.
And so in early depictions of Virgo, it was a woman with bird wings. And so Sagittarius is a, you know, centaur. And Gemini is, you know, kind of the twin. And then Pisces is the two fish. But it talks about, you know, the time of year. So in cardinal signs, you have like the growing or falling of light, very dramatically. The beginning of Aries, the quality of light at the beginning of Aries is very different than the end of Aries. And the beginning of Libra, the quality of light then, it descends down. It's very different.
Right.
Capricorn is the same.
It's very dramatic.
And Cancer is the same. It's very dramatic. The fixed signs are the stable-bodied signs. So they hold the light as best they can. So the beginning of Taurus light is similar to the end of Taurus light.
Right.
Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, similar.
Yeah.
But then the mutables, they fluctuate. They're double-bodied. They go back and forth. Like the quality of light, it undulates more, and it shows the flexibility and the nuance. And so it seems like it could be duplicitous, or the one hand doesn't know what the other's doing.
Yeah.
That's kind of their job.
Yeah.
It's their job to be that way.
Yeah.
Because we can't all be fixed. We can't all be cardinal.
Yeah.
We have to have an intermediary between the two.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think we want, because we crave certainty, we want things to be one way or another.
Yeah.
And so
But
then
they're
there's
not.
like, but it's not the way that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more true that things are both and.
Yeah.
Kind of these opposites. Jung does call it the transcendent function.
Well, I think that, I think we covered it. Do you have any last words just about Pisces or any of the cards that we talked about?
No.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Zeke.
Thanks, Krista.